Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Emotional Grit, the podcast where you can learn about the power of perspective and the science that fuels us. I'm your host, Jennifer Fernjack, and I'm grateful to say that my guest today is Doug Salisbury. His amazing story about emotional grit goes from addiction to serving as an advocate. And so I look forward to hearing his stories today and ways that we can learn from them. So please feel free to like and subscribe to the podcast. The podcast here is called Emotional Grit on YouTube, and I will go ahead and get things started. So, Doug, thank you very kindly for being here.
Thank you for asking me. I'm grateful and blessed to be here.
Awesome. So in reference to addiction, could you please take the listeners back to when you first delved into that world? Was it like maybe friends who were bad influences, or was it something on the home front, or how did that kind of get started for you?
Well, that was pretty simple. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and I smoked my first joint at the age of 9. We lived out on Westbury, which is was country back then. So I smoked my first joint at the age of 9,
And
and
how
it
did
started from there.
and how did you get access to the joint when you were 9?
The neighbor, his dad played for the Houston Oilers, and he smoked all the time, so we were able to get it.
Okay. So was it one of those things where you wanted it to be cool with like the older kids or some things? Was it like more of a social thing to do?
Right. Well, yeah, it's just like the high school thing with smoking, how everybody got together and you smoke. So we always went out to the barn out there and smoked our joint. And it
And
took,
and as far as the use went of the joints, was it something where after a while, what initially kind of started out as something fun to do became more of a need as opposed to a want? Or when did that happen?
so my main goal there was to understand an addiction is I have an addictive personality to begin with. So a lot of people who are addicts do tend to have addictive personalities, and I did. So it kind of lit the fire. The fire was probably already there, so it kind of lit the fire, and it just went. By the time I was 12, I was a full blown addict.
Wow. So how did you get the money to pay for it?
You don't. You steal. You borrow. You lie. You cheat.
Did you ever get caught doing anything?
I went later on when I was 19. I was going to get 5 years. I was a car thief, stole cars. So that's how we paid for our addiction. And I was going to get 5 years, but instead of that, the judge allowed me to join the military. So I joined the military.
Wow, that's amazing. So, well, as far as how your family was affected by this, what were your parents' takes on what was happening, and how did they handle things?
I was I had become very good at hiding the perspective of what happened outside and what I did inside. And as addicts, we do get good at that. So, and I had a good family, but we were still separated. So there wasn't a lot of that interaction. There was interaction, but not a lot. So it was easy to kind of get away with stuff.
I suppose. So then were they surprised then when you said, "I want to go join the military," or how did you share that with them?
Well, my dad, I remember my dad going, "Well, good luck with that. We'll see how that goes," because he probably knew at that time I was going to mess that up too, because I've been kicked out of high school, been kicked out of everything, and already been in and out of the joint a couple of times. So it was like, well, here we go. Just something else for him to mess up.
Well, so like when you mentioned getting kicked out of high school, what had happened there?
I was using and got caught, and I said some things I would regret saying today. I said back
Okay.
then, but they said, "All right, well, you got to go." So I just they said, "You're no longer welcome here."
And if I understood you correctly, did you also say that you had been to jail as well in high school, or had
Yeah, in
served?
and out. Yeah, I
Okay.
I got caught stealing a boat motor,
Oh wow. I never
and
even
we were
thought about
running down
that.
the street with this Johnson 150 on my shoulder, and got caught by the cops. And tried to jump a ditch with it, and because I thought I was Superman, I was high, so I thought I was Superman and could jump this ditch with this lawnmower on my shoulder. Didn't make it.
Right. So, as far as your experience then, whether it was serving time in school or getting kicked out of school or just or being arrested, that kind of thing, did your life kind of like go up and down as far as you thinking like, I'm going to beat this, I'm not going to do it anymore? Or was it kind of like, you know what, I'm invincible, and you kind of felt like you were still riding that wave?
I think I had, when I joined the military, I'd been in treatment center 6 times in the military. And
Wow.
once I got kicked out of the military, I've been in another like 6 treatment centers when I got back here.
Wow.
So once I started around, probably I would say around the age of 15, it was all downhill from there. And there was no
Wow.
real, because I didn't care. I was, I was, I was full blown at it, and that's all I cared about was getting high.
Were there ever times where, whether it was your parents or perhaps siblings or someone questioned you on things, like they were kind of suspicious of, I think something's going on here, or was it literally hidden in plain sight until you got arrested, of course? But
Well, generally, I would say, generally speaking, I'd gotten very good at hiding it. And everybody in my particular, I guess my circle then had their own lives. So there wasn't a lot of that interaction in between. And I think my dad and my mom at that time, when I was getting in a lot of trouble, he's just a kid, he's just a teenager.
right.
And to this day, I don't know if they ever actually were understood the addiction in that. Now, later on, when I got into recovery, my mom started going to Al-Anon. I hate Al-Anon. Only
Why did
reason,
she,
wait a minute, hold on. The only reason why I say
okay.
that is because they taught my mom how to say no, and it screwed up my
Oh,
addiction. So every time I got into trouble, I would call my mom, and she'd come and rescue me. But until she got hooked up with Al-Anon, I don't think she really truly understood the perspectives of the addiction and how to deal with it. So when she got hooked up, I was in jail one time. I called her. She said, "Son, you're on your own. I love you. You're my son, but that's it."
yeah. Wow. That must have been really tough for her. I mean, like kind of the whole tough love thing. Did she ever tell you later just kind of how that affected her?
My mom would say, she would say to this day, she was still here, that the worst times were at night when she fell asleep. Because the phone only rings at 2 o'clock in the morning if something's bad. And
Right,
she
right.
dreaded going to sleep, waiting on the phone to ring to figure out where I was or what I got into trouble this time for.
Wow. Yeah, that had to have been pretty tough, I would think, you know. But so with the gift of hindsight, if you were to, I guess, kind of be that, what's the metaphor, the football metaphor? Is it Monday morning quarterback or whatever it is, where people say that you have the gift of hindsight as far as what should have been done in the game? With like with you looking backwards, are there certain signs that you would actually recommend people look for, whether it's parents noticing with their kids or perhaps teachers noticing with students that maybe if people knew to look for them, they would know earlier that something was happening?
Yeah, yeah. So in addiction, we have to understand everybody plays a different role as the addict. So I like to, I teach. I've been a counselor now 30 years. I just retired, but I was a counselor for 30 years. And I would teach the parent groups that even the silent ones are the ones you need to pay attention to also.
Mhm.
Even the grade A students, if they're doing grade A and then one year it starts to slide and slide, those are the ones. Or the ones that you don't hear from. Also, you need to be aware of and pay attention to those because generally speaking, there's something going on that you need to pay attention to.
I could see grades being a big one for sure. Or all of a sudden the kid wants to sleep a lot during the day and be up all night. You know, there'd be certain things like that too, I would think. But but sometimes too, I'll hear stories where maybe the parents travel for work, or maybe they work a midnight shift, and so they're sleeping during the day, or an afternoon shift, and they're just not going to see those cues as much, you know, with their kid.
And think about today in the society we live in today. Both parents usually are working. So you get home, you cook dinner, you got to cook, clean, do all that stuff. The husband's doing his thing. And there's how much interaction truly is there. Think about the families today. How many times have we seen a family sitting at a dinner table? Everybody's on their phone.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not that interaction that we used to have growing up, that I used to have, or was expected in the family. Everybody sat down at the dinner table and conversations happen. But now you walk by a family and everybody's on the phone, texting
Yeah.
or that.
Yeah, no, I think that's sad on a lot of different levels. I can that's a good point. When you were in jail, I assume that were you in like some kind of it was like a juvenile detention center or something when you were in high school, or was it like an actual jail?
LGL.
Jail,
Yeah.
okay. When you were there, did you ever have any pivotal moments where you thought, "Wow, you know what? I didn't intend to be here. Obviously, I'm learning my lesson. I want to try to recover." Or was it a matter of, or was it the opposite, where it was counting down the days until you knew that you were going to be out and with no
It,
intention of,
for me, up until probably the last year before I stopped using, I never really did. It was, I got to watch my language. Screw the world. It's game on. Let's just get high, and that's all I cared about. And I never really had that individual to step in and say something so that it would put a thought between here and here.
yeah,
Because my worst enemy as an addict is what goes on between here and here.
yeah, yeah.
So I never really had that. Nobody ever handed me a pamphlet and say, Doug, you know, I grew up with just say no. That was a joke.
Oh yeah, yeah. Was
That
that
was a
Nancy
joke.
Reagan? I think it was Nancy.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
just,
right.
no. So it just, nobody ever sat down with that. So I never really had that until that, probably about that last year of my using period. Then I started to think about, holy crap, what's going on here?
Right. So fast forward to when you were in the military. How old do you think you were when you joined?
20,
Okay. And was it the Navy? I'm sorry, was it the
the
Navy that you were
Navy.
in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
was with.
So as a 20-year-old in the Navy, I assume you went to different ports in different countries, I would think.
We went to boot camp in Orlando. I got set back in boot camp, so I had to start boot camp all over again. And then once I got out of boot camp, I went to Millington, Tennessee to school, did the school, and then they shipped me to Virginia where I was on the USS Nimitz aircraft
Okay.
carrier. So I went, and then I remember walking on board and us leaving that night, and we were out to sea.
Wow. So all of a sudden the big world is right there in front of you. Yeah, your world just opened up from this from like were you originally from a small town?
Houston.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was thinking a suburb of Houston initially, but yeah. So to go from that to all of a sudden being out in the ocean, were there more temptations then since you weren't at home as far as being able to have access to drugs or alcohol?
Well, I do have an honorable discharge under unsatisfactory conditions. So, but I do remember when first couple nights on the boat, that's when I mentioned to you beforehand, I saw somebody drinking Aqua Velva. And at that time, Aqua Velva had about 48%, somewhere in there, of alcohol in it. So we could catch a buzz off of Aqua Velva. Now, I had the freshest breath in the world, probably, but we were drinking Aqua Velva, and it started again because I had not been into a true recovery center the whole time. Now, I've been to two other recovery centers before that, but I got kicked out on one, and then I left the other one early. Wasn't for me
Okay.
at the time. So
What was the most helpful for you in one of the recovery centers? Like what kind of gave you a moment of pause or inspired you to try to move forward? Was there anything that like for example, I've heard some people say even something such as music or artwork can actually lower recidivism rates. You know, because it can actually be a way for people to communicate and express themselves. other people, I know there are jails that are out there that have pets for people. Like if you Google it, there's actual programs where I think it's cats. Yeah, it's cats that I've seen before, where it's given the people who are in the jail. I think it might be prison programs, a sense of purpose because now they're taking care of something. And so I'm just wondering for you and your experience, was there anything that stood out to you that helped with your time
Well,
there?
now this is my personal
Yeah.
experience. 40 years ago in recovery, there was none of what you see today in recovery.
Oh,
It was hardcore. So the very first sponsor I had said, "You make 180 meetings in 180 days. I'll think about being your sponsor. Until then, I don't want to play games with you."
wow.
But so it was a lot more.
Hardball.
Yeah. So even the recovery centers back then were typically, I don't want to use the word woke or anything like that, but they were different back then than what we see today in some recovery centers.
Yeah. Okay. So fast forward, you're out of the military. Then where did life take you after that?
I had gotten in trouble in the military, and I got sent to a captain's mast, and it was on the boat. They said, one of the gentlemen there said, "If you're willing to do what you're doing now to get out, I don't want you in the military." So they kicked me out. I went to Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they released me at that time. I was supposed to come back to Houston, but I got drunk and ended up in Florida on a Greyhound bus in Florida.
Oh,
And I
oops.
had to
Yeah.
call my dad and say, "Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm not there. Come back tomorrow. It'll take me another day to get there on this bus." So I got back to Houston and it started all over again.
Was it because you came across old friends?
But say that again.
Is it because you met old friends that maybe
No,
that
I
you
was a loner. I was really in my addiction. Mostly my addiction was I was a loner. I was a loner.
and were you okay with that? Like some people are more introverted, or was it a matter of like a
So I
cry
was.
for help? Like you wanted to be around people?
I did good at that time in my using as a loner. I didn't want anybody interacting with me when I was doing it. So
Yeah.
I was on now. Today I understand where some of that came from. I had been molested when I was 12 by a family lawyer. So I do understand where some of that came from today and how I used that trying to play the victim off and all of that so that I could be a loner and nobody screw with me.
Well, I'm sorry that that happened to you. That I mean, that's a lot to get your head around, and I can see why it would play a role in what you experienced as far as addiction and trying to escape how you were feeling and what you were going through. You know,
That was
but
oh, in the early years, that was a large part of it. And my dad was a good dad, but he was a distant dad, but he was still there, but he was a distant dad. So he was still a good dad. He took care of us. We never really wanted for anything, but we never had that interaction between me
yeah,
and him.
was it more of a traditional role where it's dad's the breadwinner, but didn't so much really
Came
engage with the
home, his
kids?
coffee was ready, the meal was ready. We
Yes,
ate dinner.
yes,
He went and
yep,
sat, watched Walter Cronkite, then he read the news or did whatever and went to bed.
yes. So, how many years after that was it that you had either some kind of an epiphany, or maybe it was some kind of a random thoughts that finally got some traction as far as you know what
So
I've got to get sober.
I came back. So that's pretty easy to answer. I came back and I ended up in Austin, sleeping on the street in Austin, and I was selling myself for anybody that wanted it to get high. And it was
Oh,
like, oh, this is not me. This
uh,
is not, no. I think I had really gone that far. So I went to another treatment center, but it didn't last. It lasted 2 weeks, and then I had to get high. Ended up back in Beaumont here where I'm living now. And this is the simplest thing. Woke up on a Tuesday morning, June 9th, I think it was Tuesday, June 19th, 1983. I had one shoe, my pants, and nothing else in a one-bedroom apartment. I was sleeping on a cot. To this day, I remember looking up at the ceiling. It had that wood grain ceiling. And I was thinking, I don't want to die like this.
Yeah.
Where that came from, I don't know. But I remember to this day thinking that. And I walked 8 miles to Fellowship here in Beaumont to make the noon meeting. And that's where I met my first sponsor. And I walked in, and I know the whole room went, oh Lord, here we go again. Doug's back again. Here we go. What's wrong this time? So it was that process. But since then, I've not used anything.
What do you think made a difference this time versus the other times, as far as you going, you know what? No, for sure, for sure. I want to. Was it more like an accumulation of the things that you've mentioned, like the collectively? You're like,
Well,
I'm done.
at that time, I was using and I was cutting. So it steadily was getting worse and worse and worse. And I remember the apartment didn't have nothing. I had a cot, an army cot I was sleeping on. There was nothing in the apartment, nothing at all. And I just remember looking down, had one shoe on, I had my pants, no shirt, and that was it. And I remember using the last time was June 1st, 1983. I don't, to this day, I don't remember the next 19 days before I woke up that morning and said that was it. So where did 19 days go? People ask me sometimes, don't you want to remember? It's like, you know what? No, because I remember what went on when I do remember things. I don't want to know what I was doing for those 19 days. I really
Right.
don't.
So, would you say that the process was? I mean, I would assume a difficult one, or was it a more matter of because you had that mindset? Was it like a few weeks where you went through withdrawals, or how long of a process was it to get clean?
To be totally clean, yeah, I was having withdrawals. I had gone in when I first got that June 19th, 1983. I was in and out the last month. The month after I stopped using ER maybe a couple of times because of the shakes, and I thought I was going to die in that, and having to tell them what was going on. But I was also lucky I was able to call this guy, and he would show up with the hospital with me and give me all the sayings that the AA saying go and say, all right, all right, all right, all right. So we did all that, but unfortunately, when I quit, it was actually really easy. For me, I didn't struggle as much as I thought I was going to. Now I still struggle. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But in that I remember sleeping that night thinking, you want me to make 180 meetings, 180 days. What about work? What about the Survivor series that I want to watch? What about this? What about this? What about this? And at that time, that's how the program kind of worked. It was serious. You wanted to be serious, you had to be serious.
Right.
So I think making those 180 meetings in that first 100 days really was my foundation that I built. I wasn't allowed to speak for the first, I think, 3 months. Had to go to meetings, but I wasn't allowed to speak at a meeting.
Really? And this was like was it a Alcoholics Anonymous kind of a meeting, or what?
I had,
Really?
and he's the
What was
one
the
who
thought?
taught me. I use this still today. This as a counselor, I still use it today. I don't know how many of us what's the hardest thing we have to do as a human in interacting with somebody else? Listening.
Yeah.
Because usually when we're listening to respond or we're listening to see what we want to see, but we're missing everything else in between. So in people that I sponsor today, I do this and they say, well, I want to speak. And it's like, you've been using for 38 years and you want to tell everybody how great the world is today because you've been sober 3 days. No, it ain't going to work. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, initially I thought, well, that's an approach I didn't really anticipate, but now that you explain it, it makes more sense for
And he
sure.
taught me, and I use that still today. I have a young man that I'm sponsoring now, and he's not allowed. He's been going 2 months now. He's not allowed to speak in a meeting. He has to call me or he talks to his friends. But in the meeting, he has to listen because I was using so much. 3 days being sober is not enough to get it. It's sorry, it's just not enough.
Right. So
And I'm only
would you?
going to hear what I want to hear then.
Oh,
But
yeah.
as long as I sit and listen, because I'm still, sometimes I still, what comes out of here sometimes is not registered up here.
That's fair. So, what would you say are some misconceptions that people have about people who are suffering from addiction? Like, are there any stereotypes that where you're like, that's not right? Like, for example, there's someone that I met a few years ago who fell off a ladder and now she has a traumatic brain injury. And with a brain injury, you can't see it from the outside. There's no cast, no cane, no crutch. It's just on the inside. So people would sometimes assume that she was being lazy if she was wanting to go take a nap, when really it was because her head was bothering her. Or people might judge her in Target because she'd be in Target in the middle of the winter wearing sunglasses, and people might think, what are you, too cool for school? Like, why are you wearing sunglasses in the middle of the winter inside Target? Well, no, it's because the light in the store would hurt her eyes because of the injury. But since there was nothing tangible for people to see, they wouldn't cut her any slack. So I'm wondering, in the world of addiction, are there any misconceptions people have that you're aware of about people who have addiction that you want to call out for listeners so that they know to,
Lying, cheating, stealing.
oh,
Um, how many of us played the victim?
yeah.
And we're as addicts, we're good at playing the victim. How many of us? What's the word I want to use? Are good perpetrators, so we can play the victim.
Well, be like, what's a good example of that?
Being married and you starting a fight, and you know that pushes her buttons, because if she gets mad at you, then you have a reason to go out and use or drink now.
Wow. I never thought about that. Okay. Yep.
You
I could
know,
see that.
so if what I like to teach and what I think about in my recovery today, when things go wrong, I have to look at my responsibility first, because nothing happens to me today I don't play a part in, one
Right.
way or another. That's
Right.
the truth for me. So if my neighbor gets mad at me because I mowed the yard today, but I know he doesn't want me mowing that one section next to him, but I don't like the way it looks, so I mowed it. He'll get over it. Well, then I can't be mad because he comes over here and wants to holler at me because I mowed that section of
Because
the
you did
yard.
it. Right.
Because
Right.
I know he said, "Don't mow my section, Doug. I like it like this." But I did it because I wanted to. And now I can play the victim. So if I drink, well, now I can have a beer because he's mad at me.
That's interesting. In your mind, you could justify it. Like
Yeah,
I've earned this beer. Oh yeah. Okay. I guess I hadn't thought about that.
that's rationalizing and justifying, and that justifying why I drink today. But I have to look at my role that I play. And
Wow.
that's where
Yeah.
I like to. My first sponsor taught me that. I had him for, I don't know, probably 17 years as my first sponsor. And we always, anytime something went wrong, he would go, "What was your role that you played, Doug?"
Oh.
And I had to stop. That's the hard thing to do as a human being, is look at my part, because it's easier to blame and look at what they did. But I have to stop and realize, well, I started it, but I'm now going to play the victim. Or how many of you start a fight going around the bush, over their neighbor's house, in through the backyard, over across that ditch, and then you come in this way because you think nobody knows or nobody noticed that you did that to start this? That makes sense?
Right. Right. No, I get that. So how did you assimilate into so like the military is behind you. How did you then assimilate into the working world? How did you
So
how that work?
I think 3 weeks after I got sober, I got hired on to push a broom at Caterpillar here in Beaumont. And I started that. So I've been coming up on 40 years next month. I've only had 3 jobs in those 40.
Wow, that's great.
So Caterpillar. I started there and I decided to go back to school, become a diesel mechanic. So I went back to school, got my first associate degree, and
Wow.
stayed there for 10 years, something like that. And then I got hurt on the job. I hurt my back. And the doctor at that time said, well, you can't go do this work no more. And like, what am I supposed to do? I love that job. And at that time, I had started to develop a relationship back with my dad. We were at
Cool.
lunch one day. He goes, Doug, how long you been clean now? I said, 10 or 11 years. He said, why don't you go to school and become a counselor? You're good at what you do. Well, I never thought about that, Dad. I never really thought. So I went back to school, got my LCDC, and was that wrote that off.
Wow. So you became a counselor then?
Uh-huh. I started off spinal tap. I've worked in outpatient, detox, residential, outpatient, inpatient, and then my last job was Jefferson County probation in the drug court, working in the drug court.
So are you able to be very transparent with people in those scenarios as far as, hey, you know what? I get it. I have walked in your shoes. Can you build that credibility with people, or do you have to kind of keep your own stuff separate?
At spinal tap, there are certain positions as a counselor you need to be aware of. You can do that, but you still have to meet a criteria as a licensed counselor. You still can't go too far. So at probation, we could go so far, but there still had to be that difference between what I was teaching and what happens out in the real world as an addict.
Well, I think that even in scenarios where maybe you couldn't share your own personal story or as much as you would like, I'm still willing to believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, because obviously I haven't known you that long here, but I'm sure people can tell that you believe in what you're doing. You don't just know how to do the job, you actually believe in it because you can appreciate what it represents and what it can do for people.
On a one-on-one basis, if you learn to listen properly on a one-on-one basis, you know who you can go with and who you can't. You do tend to learn those people you're working with who not going to use it, or they'll use it for the right reason. You have to be aware of that. But now, as a state license, working where I was with probation, you still had to have that separation. But out in the real world, I didn't. If you and I were sitting at Waffle House, I would tell you all kinds of stories about what I did because I don't care anymore. It's like
Well,
whatever,
and you learned from it, I'm assuming, it's kind of like, hey, you
You
know
do.
what? I learned from it. Here I am today, which is huge.
And as a sponsor, I still have a sponsor. I still have a
Oh,
sponsor today. But as a sponsor now, I also have to be aware who I'm working with, where I can go, at what point I can go there, when they're ready or they're not ready. We we do a smoking group in one of the other groups that I do, and one of the ladies is, "Why aren't you being tougher on him?" Well, he's not. You can't drink. You can bring the horse to the water, as they say, but you can't make them drink. But you
right.
can teach them. You can teach them, throwing little tidbits until they get where they're supposed to be in recovery, so that you can share something that needs to be shared.
Can see that. I think that a lot of people, when they think about addiction, whether it is alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, even gambling, different kinds of things, people can think about the physicality of it, but don't think about the psychology of it, or don't think about the emotion that comes with it. It's kind of a layered, complex issue. And so I just really think it's great what you're doing. And because are you still doing the counseling, or have you retired
I
from
had
that,
to
or?
retire because of my health conditions. But
Okay.
what you were saying is you have to be aware that you need to meet them where they are, right? You meet them where they are.
Mhm.
And I had a talk with a gentleman here the other night, and he said, I don't understand addiction. I don't get it. And if you haven't been there, you're not going to understand it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, one on one as an addict to another addict, we do get those moments. But
Yeah.
trying to explain that to somebody outside, why Doug, you had, why are you high when that's not who you are? But yet I didn't care. I just had to get high. They
Right.
don't understand that because it's hard to understand that. But as an addict, I absolutely understand whatever it took to get high. That's what I was going to do to get high.
Yeah, because you're not looking at it logically. You're looking at it as, hey, you know what? It's you want the high. So
Logic. How does logic even play as an addict when I cross that line? Our logic just goes right out the window.
mm-hmm.
It
Oh,
does.
oh, would you say that whether it is an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or different kinds of meetings for other kinds of addiction, do they take into consideration whether it's somebody's age? Like, for example, are people in their 20s addressed differently than, say, someone who's older, or are there cultural differences, or is it kind of like a single program and then people just try to adapt to become a part of
That,
it?
I think a lot of that AA has changed from where I started back then. It has changed a lot since I started the program. And we do have to be aware that different cultures think about and behave different ways. Age groups do make a difference. Because when I was 12 years old, 15, 18 years old, my dad was, well, in his 40s, but he was a smart man, but he still didn't know as much as I did, you
Of
know.
course
So,
not. Yeah.
and I imagine if I was 40 going the other direction, it's like, well, I'm 40 years old. You don't know what I've been through, and you're too young to know what I know. So it goes both ways.
Right.
And think about cultures.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
a I'm on the board at Child Abuse and Forensics here in Beaumont. Cultures make a big difference in how people behave and think about things. The white population, whatever that means, is okay with talking about it, generally speaking. In the black community, it's not really talked about because it's
Um,
not. Even with the Hispanic community, it's talked about a little bit different. Asian community, how many Asians do you see in an AA hall? Very few.
I would say probably not a whole lot. Yeah.
No. So those things, and hopefully as a sponsor, as a counselor, if any of you counselors out there listening to me, you need to think about those things and how don't let your prejudice interfere in developing that rapport with that client or that other
Yeah.
individual to get them to understand.
I know when I first moved to Minneapolis, like 30 years ago, it was a long time ago, from northern Minnesota. A colleague of mine mentioned that his brother had been struggling with addiction and how he had been going to some AA meetings. And one thing, and again, this is like 30 years ago, so I'm not sure if it's still the same now, but one thing that they would bring up sometimes in their meetings is the Serenity Prayer. Are you familiar with the Serenity Prayer?
Right?
Okay, so and I'm paraphrasing, but it's something to the effect of God help me change the things I can, accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I'm wondering if you have any examples of kind of that dichotomy in people's minds as far as help me understand like the things that I can change and give me the strength to do it, but also understand the things I can't change. Um, do you have any
That's
examples of
very
that? Like,
easy. That's easy. I wish I had a picture I could show you. 5 years ago, I lost my mom to Alzheimer's. A
oh
month
wow.
later, I was diagnosed with PAD, peripheral artery disease, and I had my first bypass. It failed. I had my other bypass. It failed. I had a heart condition that developed from that bypass. It failed, and I had open heart surgery. Lost my sister to a heart attack. My house burnt down and lost everything I own.
Within
To
five
this
years.
day, huh?
Within 5 years?
Within the last 5 years. But here's what my recovery has taught me. If you could see it right behind me, I live in a 29-foot travel trailer right now, trying to recover from the house fire. Lost everything I own. Right behind me, I'm building a tiny house,
I love tiny
my
houses.
own tiny house. So I get up every day and I tell myself, all right, Douglas, your leg hurts. You have to be careful because I have a specific heart condition. I have atypical. My heart goes all kind of places all day long, but I'm not. It's like whatever. I'm not gonna. You won't find me sitting on the couch, gone. You're gonna find me outside with a saw in my hand or a hammer in my hand or something. I'm not gonna sit here and feel sorry because I can't do things. So I bought a table saw. My neighbor and I rearranged the table saw and built another part on it so that I could do work on it without him being there. So the whole point about it is, yes, I can't do certain things that I could 10 years ago. All I do is get up every day and figure out new ways of doing those same things.
Which as you can see above my head, I have the words emotional grit. That's the theme of my book that inspired this podcast. It's figuring out the how. And sometimes it's adapting to a new normal. Sometimes it's kind of trying to think through things. I know for me, living in Minnesota, I grew up with the idea of you can complain about the snow or you can do something about it. Like go put on a pair of boots and go shovel. It's kind of that you can't fight City Hall, so to speak. It's a cold climate, it's gonna have snow, and
I'm,
and
I'm
and kind of that mindset of grit helped me later in life because in my 40s I had surgery for a brain tumor, and I learned through my brain tumor diagnosis and the corresponding radiation treatments, even though the tumor wasn't cancerous, but I got the radiation because it was too dangerous to take out the whole tumor as part of the surgery. But it gave me an appreciation for things in life, and it gave me, including the power of perspective. So, as some of my listeners know, I had showed a picture to a former colleague of mine of me with the actual stitches that I had in my head from here down to here as part of the surgery. And my head was partially shaved. This is about 10 years ago. And then in the next picture, my hair is growing back a little bit, and you could tell that the stitches had been taken out, but you could still see kind of where they were. And when I showed that picture to my colleague, he said, "Oh, Jen, no offense, but that picture is kind of creepy." And we laughed about it. But I thought, what a good example of perspective, because what was creepy to him is beautiful to me because the picture shows I was healing. And so it goes to show you, it's kind of trying to figure out the how and move forward. And for you, whether it's working with the saw or to build the tiny house and do other things, or for you now serving as an advocate for people, whether it be having been a counselor before or taking things that you learned through your experience, or whether it be with addiction or serving as an advocate and helping others through their situation, and applying that same mindset of grit to now your health scares as far as your heart and your leg and different things that are going on. I think there's a huge difference between quantity and quality of life. And it's empowering to know that as far as quality of life, that we can have a voice in that by being able to try to move forward with stuff. So I think your mindset's amazing.
Welcome to the journey and the adventure we call life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm 62. Out of everything I've been through in my life, all the things that I did in my addiction, this ain't. If this is all you got, devil brain, you're running behind. I can't. I'm not slowing down to let you catch up with me.
It's
Sorry.
perspective. If you
So it's like I'm staining a part of my. I've finished the bedroom and the bathroom. I'm staining the walls. I have to stain the ceiling. So I have a graft that goes from my shoulder into down my stomach into both legs, and it's solid. It's blocked up. It's no good. So I can't raise my right arm so far above my head. So when I started staining, it's like, how am I going to do this? I took my shop vac and I have my paintbrush taped inside the hose, and I'm doing this and I'm getting it done. So it's like the table saw. Welcome to life. I look at all the things we've been through that got us to where we are today.
Yep.
And I'm having as much fun learning new ways. I'm sure somebody, if they walked up to the little tiny house right now and saw me with the vacuum hose, with the paintbrush taped
I
in
think
the
it's
center of
brilliant.
it, and I'm doing this, staining, they would go, "What in the world is he doing?"
I think it's
And it,
awesome. I know I was at my grandma's apartment a couple of years ago, and she couldn't get her light bulb to turn off in her bedroom lamp, and it was super hot, and just trying to turn the little knob, it wasn't working. So without missing a beat, my because and she couldn't lean over the nightstand to unplug it either. So it was kind of stuck, you know. So, not to be deterred, she went in the kitchen, got an oven mitt, and then used her hand with the oven mitt and took out the bulb. I'm like, Grandma, that's brilliant. You used an oven mitt on a lamp, you know? But it's like that to me is wisdom, not just knowledge, but wisdom. You learn to pivot. You learn to kind of think on your feet and just kind of figure stuff out, you know?
But it also as an addict, I know me as an addict. If I was to sit on this couch and start feeling just this much sorry for myself, it's going to grow into something that I'm
Yeah.
not going to be able to control.
Yeah.
And then my first thought is, well, you know what? I have two more surgeries coming up. No, I can't find a doctor to take this crap out. So, you know what? Life's been crap for the last 5 years. I deserve a beer. And I know I will start, once I start thinking that way,
Uh,
it's just going to be rumbling around in my head until I
yeah.
drink a beer. And then it's game on for me. It'll be game on. I'll go straight from a beer to a pokey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So why? Why not just, why not? I stood there and I remember looking at the vacuum and I was thinking, that hose is 4 foot long. I could just do this and I'll take that paintbrush and just dip it in the stain and I'll do
That's
this.
so brilliant. So
And it's
brilliant.
like, all right, devil, all right, addiction, all right, my disease, you're trying to keep me down, but you're going to have to keep up with me.
Good for you. Exactly. So, with the gift of hindsight, if you could go back to you in high school and give yourself some advice back then, what would it be?
This is my number one actual regret today is number one. If I had stayed in the Navy when I joined the Navy, I could have been retired at the age of 47.
Wow.
And it's like, damn, oh man, what would life have looked like if they retired from the Navy with full benefits, all that stuff at the age of 47? If I had,
Right.
you know, it's like you got to roll the windows down. Why, Doug? Because once I pull my head out of you know where, I don't want it to crack the windows.
Right, right, right.
So
But
it's
you
like,
know what? Because sometimes life throws a curveball, and obviously, you weren't going you retiring from the Navy wasn't going to be a thing. Because life threw a curveball, and you ended up going to school and becoming a counselor. Think of all the people you've helped. Whereas if you maybe had stayed in the Navy, you wouldn't have met those people.
well,
So
now
it's
I've been on the board at Child Abuse and Forensics. I'm making a big difference there for the last 10 years. I'm on the board here at TAN, the Triangle AIDS Network. We also have a full service health clinic now. I'm on the executive committee there. We're making a difference. I joined the PAD group, and now I'm making a difference there. And
and what does
it,
PAD stand
that's
for?
peripheral artery disease. So I post these little videos of me doing the things that I do building this house in the hopes that, my brother will tell me, Doug, sit down, sit. No, Grady, my neighbor, Jerry, I've known him since junior high. They're not going to walk over here and check on me and find me on this couch watching Survivor. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
He's going to come out. Doug's been running that grill all day. Something's wrong. He's going to come over and I'm going to be laying out there. If it's my time to go, I'm going to have the drill in my hand. I'm not going to sit on this couch and play victim because I got this disease now. And it's like, all right, I have it. Well, let's figure it out. It's so exciting to me today to think as soon as we're off of here, I'm going back out there to work.
Yes, it's perspective. Good. That's phenomenal. Yeah, that's phenomenal. It's you're having a voice in your experience as opposed to being kind of having a passive role in it. And it's just I don't know. It's one thing to experience a health scare or obviously an addiction scare, things like that. But if you can own the scenario as opposed to having it own you, it can be so inspiring as far as moving forward and taking next steps, But also with the gift of hindsight, what like transferable skills would you say have come from whether it's your addiction experience, coming into being an advocate for others. Like, for example, you may have become more patient, or maybe you've learned to value relationships more than you would have before. Like, what positive things like that have come out of the
So
situation?
for all those addicts out there that are hopefully listening to me, here it's pretty simple. This is pretty simple. Get Me Clean coming June 19th next month, be 40 years. Get Me Clean and Sober. Realizing, understanding this too shall pass.
Yeah,
So it's pretty
yeah,
simple for me. And it goes down to a saying that we have in recovery. You keep doing the same things, and what do you get?
yeah,
Simple, isn't it? The same
yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So, I do have 39 years. I still have bad moments, but they don't last 4 minutes simply because there's a difference in I practice what I preach. And it's taken 40 years to get here to where I've done it so much that half the time when I'm having a bad thought, I don't have to think about changing that thought because I've done it so much that I've created that in my head that it automatically kind of happens.
Yeah, there's a scientific term that's called neuroplasticity. And that's where you can kind of build these pathways in your head for different things. Like for example, for me, it's trying to be positive as well. So it's something where initially those positive thoughts can take some effort, and then after a while it becomes a habit, and after a while it becomes a mindset. So for you to say that that kind of a mindset is more natural for you now than it might have been, say, years ago, I'm not surprised. That's
That's how
that's
addiction
fantastic.
works. Addiction works the same way. We do the same thing, get the same results. So every time I got angry, lonely, or tired, I drank. And after a while, I didn't have to think about drinking. It was just an automatic. How many people, here's a funny one, how many ever get up every morning and don't speak to me until I have my first cup of coffee? And so, but I've been doing this. I'm lucky and I'm blessed and grateful. I've been doing this long enough. I like to say, if I having a bad day, I'll call my sponsor and I'll say, I got to have 5 minutes. He goes, all right, you got 5 minutes. And those 5 minutes, I'm allowed to say whatever I want to say about anybody. And sometimes it's not very polite at all.
But
And
it's
I
to
can
get it off your
remember,
chest.
yeah. And I still to this day remember the first couple of times we were doing this. He goes, Doug, Doug, Doug. And I'm still going. And then he'd hang up on me. And I'd get mad and have to call him back. But I learned after a while that's because my 5 minutes were up.
Oh,
And he would go, all right, Doug, now what are you going to do different? I could have spent the next 24 hours being angry, lonely, and tired, or just spent that 5 minutes, get over it, and do something different and move on.
right, right.
And that takes practice. It does take practice to get
I can
into
see
that
that.
mindset. And I'm lucky today where it just sometimes it happens. 2 days later, I wake up and go, oh, I forgot about that. Oh, well, never mind. All right, let's move on.
So, as we close out the podcast, do you have any final thoughts or any ideas, whether it be for someone who's suffering from addiction, or perhaps a caregiver whose loved one is suffering from addiction? Any advice for people, or things, or any resources you want to call out for people, whether it's websites or programs that you want to bring to people's attention?
Well, well, of course, I would go Kim Nicholas and the Weight of My Heart because that's our website, and Josh knows what it is. It's a peripheral artery disease website. But for addicts, you have to make the decision. And here's a question that I want to ask you. Think about this. What are you willing to do to stay sober? Now, I can hear everybody out there in the world going, whatever it takes. All right, then, here's a thought. Give me 180 meetings in 180 days, and let's see how willing you really are to tell the wife or the kids or somebody or not watch Survivor and go to a meeting.
Right,
So
right.
there's a thought there. So if you want to get clean and sober, think about that thought. What are you willing to do? Because when I was using, it was game on. I never had to ask myself what I'm not willing to do. I was willing to do everything. Now I want to stay sober and don't go to prison, don't go to jail, and don't die. So what
Right.
am I willing to do? Not watch Survivor and go to an AA meeting. When I'm tired, I'm angry and lonely, I'm frustrated, or I'm just hungry, I'll eat after the meeting. It's only an hour. I'll eat after the meeting.
Well, and I wonder for people who are out there who are suffering from addiction or fighting the challenges in their recovery period, what's their version of your vacuum? You know, like what's their little hybrid tool idea that they've used to pivot or to get around things? It's almost like your little vacuum thing is kind of a metaphor now, and that represents thinking outside the box and being willing to pivot and make things happen. Because
But
yeah, each person.
the vacuum thing is kind of simple. I can wait till somebody helps me do this, but I don't want to. I want to do it
Oh,
myself. So I
yeah,
was standing there and said, well, we fixed the table saw so I could do that. What am I going to do here? And then it just hit me. Same way with that. I'd also like to maybe address the family. If you are a family member of somebody you believe or think is an addict, Al-Anon is the way to go. You need a support system. Don't try and do this alone. You need somebody to help guide you so that, because believe it or not, the family members actually get sicker than the addict does.
oh, is it because of stress hormones?
Because what?
Is it because of stress hormones?
Well,
They-
simple. If I'm the addict, I can go use. But my mom couldn't go use to think about at 2 o'clock in the morning where the hell's my son.
right, right,
But
right.
she's stuck with that in her head. And if she's not getting help or guidance, that just goes on and on and on in the vicious. I have an escape. I'll go get high and not and
Right.
forget about it. So that's why Al-Anon is really, truly important for a family member to get that support, because I personally believe the family sometimes gets sicker than an addict for the simple reason I haven't escaped. Most of the time they don't. Think about being married to an addict.
Yeah.
That addict gets clean. Now you still have some of that infighting going on where it's simple. Now, I do remember it's kind of like the church saying you walk down the aisle, you get saved, and the world is perfect now and everything's great. Oh, ooh, I'm a winner, all this stuff. And then the very first moment something happens in the world, where does that really go? Same way with an addict. We go to meetings and we get happy and all life is great. But when the stuff hits the fan, where is your recovery?
Right, right.
And the last thing I probably would say to something like that would be, I know a lot of people that can quote the book. I do know that. Now, this is just my old timer speaking right now, okay? I know a lot of people that can quote the book, but take that individual out of that meeting, go to the Waffle House and sit and see how they treat the waitress. You will
Uh,
find out where your recovery is truly at. Now, I know the book. I can quote all the stuff. I can quote all that forwards and backwards. But how I treat somebody, how I act in the real world is where I can find out where my real program is working or not. Three
that-
stages of recovery. Dry, which is what?
I'm not sure. Like, I mean, when you say,
Dry is when you're doing the same behaviors, but you're not using.
oh,
Clean is when you're going to meetings and you're not using and you're working on those behaviors. Every now and then we get clean and we have clean days where everything's going just fine. No problem. So there's three stages for me of addiction, of recovery, and that's what being dry is a horrible experience. I have all those same insane thinking thoughts, but I'm not using and I can't hide away from them.
wow.
That's being dry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but I
What
wanted
do
to
you
say that.
what helped you the most when you were dry?
What's that?
What helped you the most when you were experiencing, being dry?
Well, right now for me, it is I've gotten to because I think being diagnosed with PAD and CAD. CAD is peripheral, is cardiomyopathy. I had my whole left side of my heart got so big they had to go in and shave it off. But
Wow.
that and my bypasses and everything I've been through with my mom, my sister in the house, I'm really having so much fun learning new things and new ways and not allowing some of that insanity to get back in and finding different things. I would burn now. 5 years ago, I took care of my mom 10 years with Alzheimer's. We were at Walmart one day and I bought a $1 birdhouse and let her sit and paint that. And that's what we did at night to keep her occupied. One night I bought a little wood burner. And now, 4 years later, I have my own business, wood burning stuff. And I have stuff
Cool.
going all over the country now. So I think it's pretty simple. And I tell people in the group all the time, you want to sit on the couch and be the victim. That's easy. That's easy. That's the easiest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is get up and stand in the middle of a room that's not fully finished that needs to be stained and go, okay, just tape the damn paintbrush to the end of the tube and paint. That's harder to do than it is sitting on the couch and feeling sorry for myself.
Well, and I would imagine that must have been quite the challenge for people during the pandemic if they had to stay home more. Like I know here in Minnesota for a while, you could only leave your home if you were part of an essential business. And so a lot of people were stuck at home. So I imagine that in those scenarios, that must have been tough for people. I
Well,
would
we
think.
went to work. I worked for probation, so we had to go to work.
Oh, so you had to go out, right, right.
Yeah, we
But
had to be there. But yeah, mom was at home. I had to be at work, and the caretaker's there with her. So, but it is, if you want to sit and be the victim, go ahead, but don't complain. Stop
right,
complaining about it
do something.
because that's your choice. You have a
Right.
choice every day you get up. Am I going to have emotional grit to go through today and be who I need to be and figure it out?
Well, and even if those moments as far as figuring things out are small ones, you can still look backwards and collectively see, wow, you know what? I got through this, 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 and this. And then collectively you can kind of draw strength from that and go, you know what? I've got enough chutzpah now to get to the next thing. It's because you can draw strength from things collectively as well,
And
you
if
know?
if you work on this enough, and I think I'm blessed where I'm at today in the sense that I don't go there a lot anymore in my past. I really don't. If people want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. But
Yeah, yeah.
I don't sit and think about it. It's like, all right, what's next? What's next? Oh, I got this project to do. Let me take 10 minutes and draw. Or, like I say, when we're through here, I'm going to go finish the bedroom. The bedroom will be done today. Whether
Ooh.
it's midnight or 1 o'clock, I'll finish it with my vacuum pump
Nice. Very nice.
painting the ceiling. So if you want to
Well,
sit on the couch and play that role, go ahead, but don't complain to me. Get
right.
up and do something different, whatever that is. I have a gentleman I work with now, and we have a funny thing saying going on. Throw the spaghetti against the wall until something sticks and go with it for right now because you never know.
Very wise. Very wise. But well, thank you so much for sharing your story today and being willing to share not only the highs but also the lows, as far as like things that you experienced, what you learned from them. And thank you for going back to school and becoming a counselor and for helping others and paying forward things that you learned and best practices and just validating how people are feeling and making a positive world.
It
So
is that simple. The tiny house. I told Josh this story the other day. I'll tell it real quick. One night we were stealing cars. We're driving down a road here in Beaumont, and the cop passed us, turned his lights on, made a U-turn, and he's coming after us. Jack is driving, looks at me and says, I'm bailing. So I'm high, had a Bowie knife 24 inches long and about 200 sets of keys. And I thought I was Superman. So I opened the car door at about 20 miles an hour, put one foot out, and ran face first into a no parking sign and knocked myself out. To this day, I remember looking up at this black cop looking down at me with his band over his face because he's laughing so hard. It had to be one of those shows. So, does that describe my addiction and where I'm at today? Hopefully, that does.
Well, you definitely have learned from things, and I just think that you've landed on your feet. So that's fantastic. But thank you so much for doing the interview. I appreciate it and sharing your stories. And those of you who are listening, thank you for being here as well. Again, please feel free to go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the actual channel here called Emotional Grit. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.